So yeah, I'm Tyler. I'm here from Canva. I work on the infra team. And yeah, I'm here to talk about operational excellence. If you're not familiar with Canva, we're a visual communications platform, which really just means we make things like presentations. It's an online tool. Presentations are really the bread and butter, but you can use Canva to make any sort of thing. Graphics, videos, you can even do docs and spreadsheets and all sorts of things now. Canva is an Australian company. Australian company is founded in 2013 in Sydney, Australia. And we have, I think, 35 billion designs created globally and 240 million monthly active users. But we're here at IDPCON, of course, so I'm going to tell you about how we started with IDPs. There we go. We started in 2021 with Backstage, and we were really focused primarily on the software catalog, ownership. That was what we really cared about. And that's what we were able to get out of it as well. It wasn't too bad to build up the software catalog and get the ownership data. But we worked on it for a long time, and over the past few years, we realized we weren't actually getting much more value out of it than just having that catalog available. In the meantime, over the past few years, we had a separate team working on operational excellence exclusively, and that was the reliability team. It's a separate team from us, but they did a lot of really great work. Unfortunately, most of that work was manual, and it involved a lot of, you heard about, I think Alex was talking about the Confluence documents that you could create and get an option view document, and teams would go through that. Very similar story here. And I think it's even worse in that as well, because what we had to do is we had to have people from the reliability team go out across the org and do a review with the team and talk to them about how their operations were going, right? That's not really a long-term scalable approach. One of the things that the Canva founders talk about when they created Canva was the desire to democratize design. You know, this idea that you don't need to be a professional designer to create good-looking things. And that's a little bit what we were thinking about with operational excellence internally as well. We don't want it to be a centralized problem. We want teams to be able to do this in a distributed fashion. We want to democratize operational excellence as well. So we were thinking about this a little bit last year. What can we do to improve this, reduce all of this manual toil? Of course, scorecards came up. And over the past year, basically, we started off, we did an IDP evaluation early in the year. That was focused a lot on the scorecards product and what we could find on the market. Cortex won out in the end, and over the past 8 months, we've been working on that migration. And we're still very new to this, but we actually just launched Cortex 2 weeks ago at the end of September. What is operational excellence? I mean, it's one of those really vague terms, I think. It can mean pretty much anything to anyone. It's a little bit like a buzzword, but it doesn't actually have that much buzz. It's something we talk about a lot in this room, but I don't hear about it a lot outside of these kinds of contexts. I'm not going to give you a definition straight away because well, it doesn't really matter what my definition specifically is, but instead of trying to define it specifically, I'm going to try and make a metaphor about it. In order to do that, I'm going to reference one of my favorite 90s movies, Armageddon. Anyone seen this? It doesn't matter. I'm going to tell you about it anyway. And I'm apologizing to the rest of you who haven't seen it because I'm really going to go over the whole plot here. Don't worry. It's 27 years old. You can't actually complain. But even if you haven't seen it and you want to see it, it's still enjoyable even if you know the whole plot. So I do recommend it. The premise is that there is a very large asteroid. I think they say it's about the size of Texas. It's hurtling towards Earth, and it's going to hit. And it's ridiculous. Texas is way bigger than you need to destroy the whole planet. I mean, it's an absurd size for an asteroid. I think if it was the size of New York, it would still destroy the whole planet. But that's the problem. That's the incident that's on the horizon. Don't worry, NASA has a plan to save the planet. It's always got to be NASA, of course. Step one of the plan is to launch some experimental ships. We're already testing in prod. We're off to a good start. They're going to take these experimental ships. They're going to fly around the moon to get up enough speed, come up behind the asteroid, and land on it from back. They have to do that, and it has to be super complicated. Once they land, it's not over yet. They have to dig a really deep hole in the asteroid, drop a nuke down the hole, take off in the same ships, get to a safe distance, blow up the nuke, and basically pray that it blows up the asteroid in such a way that the pieces don't still hit the planet. It's a really dicey plan, but that's what they came up with. The hardest part of this plan is, of course, digging the hole. It has nothing to do with the spaceships or anything like that. So instead of sending a team of highly qualified astronauts on this extremely perilous mission, they decide what we really need are some hole-digging experts. Yeah. So they recruit Bruce Willis, who plays this character, Harry Stamper. He is an oil driller, apparently the best oil driller in the world. And again, it's a 90s movie, so oil was kind of a big theme. But Harry Stamper is pretty excited to do this. Just to be clear about the metaphor that I'm trying to build here, right? The destruction of Earth is the incident in question. It's a pretty high-stakes incident. Now, probably most of our incidents aren't usually quite that high stakes. Maybe it can feel like that, but it's not quite that high. The rest of it, however, I think is pretty familiar. The really haphazard way they go about trying to solve this, everything, I think it lines up pretty well. By the way, this slide is from the Cultivates YouTube channel. If anyone hasn't seen this, highly recommended YouTube channel. And this is a complete coincidence. They came up with this YouTube video about planet-killing asteroids like a month ago after I'd already started on my slides, and felt like I had to throw it in here. So what's the point? This is a screenshot from the very end of the movie. This big celebration happening. Of course, they save the planet. No really need to spoil that. I mean, it'd be a pretty crappy movie if they let the planet get destroyed in the end. But this is the celebration that they have. Anyone get this sort of celebration when they avoid an incident? Not me, yeah, I don't think so. Usually we're gonna be better off, if you want a celebration, let the planet get destroyed first, and then put it back together. Yeah. I admit the metaphor breaks down a little bit. But the point is that, in my mind, what operational excellence really boils down to is being able to prevent incidents before they happen, and having some sort of reward structure in place, at least some sort of congratulatory moment. Oh, it says a laser pointer. It's kind of cool. To rephrase this a little bit, the two ingredients that I think are really key here are having awareness, being able to know the asteroid is coming in the first place, and having an incentive structure in place. Doesn't have to be a parade. Parade might be nice, but having some sort of incentive structure that can help you out here. The bottom line is, of course, that scorecards can help you with both of these things. And we'll talk a little bit more about how they help. This is a plant in my living room. Maybe you can still call it a plant. I did water it after I took this picture, but the point is I don't water it nearly enough, right? It just sits there very quietly, not really complaining, and I just don't notice it. I'm not very good at taking care of plants. Let's compare this with my dog. This is Colby. This is a picture about 1 minute before his expected dinner time. And he has never missed a meal. He doesn't have to complain too much, but he makes himself known. He sits there and he looks at me and he finds my eye line and he gets his dinner. I've had 0 incidents in the Colby feeding schedule. So the point is here, some of you may remember to water your plants better than I do. And there's probably some teams out there, in fact, that don't need alerts in order to run their operations perfectly, but I don't think that applies to most of us. The point is that the squeaky wheel will get the grease. So how do we make things squeakier? Things we know that need to be fixed need to be brought up into some sort of awareness. So if we can link the priority of a problem, a known problem, with its squeakiness, we can do better. Let's talk about incentivization. Going back to Armageddon, after NASA realizes that they really need an expert hole driller, they go out and they recruit Harry Stamper. And as I said, He's a good guy. He really wants to do the right thing. He wants to save the world. He's excited about this. Maybe he just likes the idea of having a planet to be around, and he's confident enough to know that he can get the job done. But Harry has a condition. He says he has to do it with his crew. He's not going to do it with a team of astronauts. So of course, he goes out and he recruits his crew that he's been friends with. And they have a much more natural reaction, I think. They say, hell no. That sounds like a crazy plan. I'm not going to go in space and die when I can die perfectly well here at home with my family. That's, one of the most realistic parts of the movie, I think. So Harry says, look, guys, we have to save the planet. No one else can possibly do this. And besides, this is NASA. You can ask for whatever you want. I'm not sure if Harry Stamper knew about NASA's budget issues. But they actually end up asking for quite a lot of things. And they get their way. And finally they say, fine, we'll do it for a reward. But there's one thing we all want. And that is, of course, if you've seen the movie, to never pay taxes again. It's hilarious. The point is this, right? Even in this fictitious universe, even when the stakes are this high, saving the whole planet, these guys weren't willing to do the work. And I can't really blame them, right? When you can get some sort of reward out of it, you're much more likely to do something. So you might have some Harry Stampers in your org that are willing to do the right thing for no reward at all. But I think generally you're going to have much better results if you do have some sort of reward. And maybe you can't promise them the ability to never pay taxes again, but there are some nice things we can have. When I was writing up the slides for this talk, I wasn't totally sure about what to talk about, but I had the title, of course, from the submission. And I was texting my mom, and this was her response to how Canva ensures operational excellence. We do actually have a pizza oven on the rooftop, but generally I don't think it helps much with operational excellence. The problem, of course, is that they'll make pizza every Thursday night, and it's not really related to how well people do in operational excellence concerns. I do think we should start thinking about this, though. Show your scorecard results and you get pizza. But memes aside, pizza parties are probably not the best reward mechanism. Usually, I think what is missing from this conversation is something that people can talk about in the performance review process. It's very easy to talk about launching feature X, Y, and Z. It's a lot harder to talk about avoiding an incident or doing some operational work which improves something's reliability, right? Avoiding a problem is hard to talk about. So how does scorecards help with these? Everyone's got their own standards that they want to define, of course. We can't define standards industry-wide as much as we might try. But the point is, within your org, you probably do have some standards that you want to try and define. That's a lot of what Alex was talking about before. So define those scorecards, give yourself a standard set of rules, and the point is you get something that you can talk about, something that you can refer back to. You have basically a well-defined common understanding of things that people can talk to. And so, for example, going back to the performance review idea, you might have trouble talking about the ways that you've improved the operational maturity level of profile service, but you can probably talk about pretty easily raising the profile service's scorecard level from bronze to silver or whatever. It gives you that common understanding. As far as awareness goes, you can also keep people focused on the things that they should actually care about, right? Scorecards are naturally linked into your catalog, which means you only have to see the results for things that you own. And you don't have to go digging through a bunch of Confluence pages. The awareness is brought up naturally. I want to talk a little bit about the scorecards that we've developed at Canva. Again, we're only 2 weeks into our launch period, but we've been developing these scorecards for months now, hand in hand with a few domain teams that have been working with us from the start. So I talked a little bit about the reliability team and those Confluence pages that they've set up. The Confluence page that they had that defined a launch checklist ended up turning into the reliability scorecard. And this checks things like on-call schedules, your SLOs alerting, and even whether or not your team has attended an incident response training class. We also have an engineering quality scorecard. This focuses much more on kind of code level things, test flakiness, flake rates, those test coverage, I mean. and concerns along those lines. We also have another scorecard, entity setup. And this is a little bit like what Alex was talking about in terms of the scorecard of scorecards. For us, it's measuring the quality of the catalog in general. And I really like this idea of meta scorecards, because keeping the catalog and the scorecards themselves at a high quality helps everything. Just in the same way that platform engineering is a force multiplier, you've got to have to apply those same kind of philosophies to scorecards and the catalog itself. So the entity setup scorecard is all about making sure you have, good ownership, good metadata, all the right annotations at the scorecard level, or sorry, at the entity level. And the point is that feeds into scorecards, and it makes the scorecards themselves more valuable. But I do want to point out again and just highlight that these scorecards for us are owned by domain teams. Our team doesn't want to own scorecards themselves. We want to just enable those for our platform. But another thing we've done, again, going back to what Alex was talking about, is having a standard set of terminology across those scorecards. So we have standard levels that all the scorecards have to use, and we keep a tight rein on what scorecards that we allow to be created, because we don't want it to be a free-for-all. There's one other learning that I want to talk about. This is a little bit of a clickbait thing, but we often talk about how we define the highest standards. It's the goal that we want to reach, the North Star. But I don't think we talk enough about the lowest standard we set. And again, Alex stole my thunder a little bit here, because he talked about how the lowest bar is sacred, and I really, really like that idea. Because fundamentally, I think there is an enormous amount of value in where you define the lowest bar. One way you could think of to define this is to start with your highest standard, whatever your mature standard is, and just take away the things that are slightly less important until you get to a low standard. I have a slightly different idea that I think might have some value, especially when you're just starting out, when you've got an established set of software components and you want to add a scorecard to them, right? So the idea is you're applying a standard to a bunch of things that already exist, rather than the much more common idea of, I have a scorecard and I'm creating a new entity, right? So the reverse is an interesting use case. So this is an actual case study from something we were trying to define a few years ago, and of course totally predates scorecards, and scorecards would have helped a lot here. The goal that we wanted to set was that people on-call rotations were not stressed. It's a nice goal. It's a little bit hard to measure. I don't know how to measure stress levels. Maybe there's a psychological number that you can assign to someone, but we didn't have that in our catalog, so we certainly didn't have a graph for it. We tried again. We came up with this. The idea being the number of people on an on-call rotation, of course, relates to how much time you have to spend of your life on call. You want to be on call less frequently, so having a larger on-call rotation means that you're on call less frequently, and you should be less stressed. And the nice thing about this is it's really easy to measure. Unfortunately, it doesn't actually define what we care about, because even though you have 4 people on call, you can have the schedule get rearranged, someone goes on vacation, you can end up on call for a whole month, or even more. Obviously, that's an extreme case, but it's something that we want to avoid, and it's not something that can be well measured by this rule. So we tried again. This is what we ended up with, this idea that each engineer in a given on-call rotation should be on call at most 25% of the time. So 1 week out of every month, or 3 weeks out of every 3 months, however you want to slice it. This is a lot closer to what we care about. And it actually comes straight from our engineering handbook, where we had defined such a standard. But this was, of course, building out some sort of mode dashboard, again, predating scorecards. The problem with this is that when we went to implement it, we applied this rule across our entire catalog, and there was a bunch of teams that still weren't meeting this rule. Too many teams. And of course, that's a totally separate problem. But the thing we came up with was this idea that we could lower this bar even further. You could set it, instead of 25% of the time, 50% of the time. And that's a terrible metric, of course. That's 2 people on an on-call rotation. You're on-call half the time. That's horrible. But if you're not meeting that bar, that means you really need a lot of help. What it did was it gave us a really clear priority signal about who was the worst off. It wasn't our goal, of course. We wanted to get people 25%, 10% as best as we can, right? But 50% tells us who is absolutely worst off, and it tells us who to focus on first. So that's what we did, and we were able to, of course, get everyone up to the 50% bar, and then we raised it again to 25%, and we keep pushing it further. Of course, scorecards are a natural fit to this problem, and if we had them back then, it would have been a lot easier. But yeah, these days, the lowest standard is still 25%, and the higher standards are even higher. But the point I really want to get across is this idea of getting a priority signal out of your metrics, right? It's not about defining what you really want to achieve. That's your highest standard. Your lowest standard is the thing that tells you who's worst off, who needs the most help. And again, going back to what Alex was saying about that sacred lowest bar, really like that idea. There's one other case study. Again, Armageddon. The heroes do eventually agree, after being promised to never pay taxes again, to go up into space and save the planet. But these guys are not astronauts. And NASA, of course, being the sticklers they are, forces them all to take a medical exam. And they all fail. And this scene just shows up for like half a second on screen, but I had to capture it because NASA knows that they have no choice. They have to send these people up to save the world. They've defined a standard that they don't meet, but the asteroid is coming, Armageddon's on its way. What are they going to do? So they use an exemption. They tell them you can go to space now and save the planet if you promise to come back and get in shape when you get back. I think this is intended as a joke in the movie, of course, but it is an interesting idea. We can't get too draconian with the scorecards, I think. It's important to have the exemption process in place and use it when it makes sense. So definitely take advantage of exemptions, use your best judgment, and don't be too draconian. I've been talking a lot about scorecards, of course, but we use Cortex for a number of other things. Most notably, we take advantage of workflows for our component scaffolding system. We already had a pretty mature system for scaffolding new services, but being able to take advantage of Cortex as the front end and using a workflow to build up all the inputs that go into component scaffolding has really been a game changer for us. We also had a number of plugins in our Backstage instance that we've ported over to Cortex, including entity-level measurements like cloud costs and compliance. We also have some global plugins. For example, we have a build dashboard and a merge queue plugin, and these track our internal CI/CD process. Of course, we also had to build up an adapter framework internally. And the idea behind the adapter framework is that we're just a platform team, but we still want all the other teams at Canva to be able to take advantage of Cortex. We don't necessarily want them to go to the effort of integrating with the API manually. So we set up a system where they can connect with their own internal APIs and just with a few lines of code, build up something that will sync that data into Cortex in whatever form that they choose. And this is really just about building usage of Cortex from both the data ingestion and the usage sides of the coin. Of course, we still care about the catalog. The catalog is the thing that powers all of this. So we ingested all of our data from Backstage into Cortex, and we're still, of course, working on improving that. A little bit about what we want to do going forward. We also want to invest more into scorecards. We have a list a mile long of teams that are really interested in using scorecards, but as I said, we're really careful about only rolling out those scorecards that actually make sense. However, we have a few that we're really excited about. For example, I mentioned the entity-level plugins for cloud costs and cloud compliance. Those are a natural fit for scorecards once we can port those over. We also want to take advantage of engineering intelligence. This is something that we're really excited about in Cortex, but we already have a bunch of existing dashboards that we need to coordinate with and make sure the data is all aligned. But yeah, that's something that's really coming up soon for us. Workflows for everything, not just component scaffolding. The thing that I'm most excited about is entity-level workflows, being able to easily take specific actions against an entity. We have a few use cases of that lined up. And of course, a continual focus on data quality. It's really a Sisyphean task to keep improving the catalog, making sure it's up to date. We have those scorecards that will help us a little bit, but it's a constant vigilance effort. So just remember, awareness and incentive. If you need help remembering, AI, it's a really easy acronym. But maybe the picture of the cute dog will help as well. This talk was actually about operational excellence, despite all the Armageddon talk, but yeah, hopefully awareness and incentives are some ideas that you can take back. That's all I have. I want to take this opportunity to thank my team, Platform Essentials, that spent a lot of this year working on this migration. Also the reliability team, who were really, really good partners with us in rolling out scorecards in general. And my manager, Nelly, who is here. Thank you. Yeah. I think we have some time for questions, if anyone has anything they'd like to ask.
Hey, hi Tyler. Just quick question about, you said you ported over some Backstage plugins to Cortex. Was wondering what the effort there was and about how long did it take? Maybe it depends per plugin, but just general idea of how long and effort to do that.
Yeah, definitely. Backstage plugins fall into two categories. You have front-end only plugins, and then plugins that maybe have some sort of back-end component as well. If it's just a front-end plugin, you can do it super easily. So Cortex plugins are just like React. Well, actually, you don't even have to use React, but it's just single-page apps that get embedded. So that's really easy to do from Backstage. We ended up taking a little bit of a shortcut initially and keeping some of the Backstage theming in place. And we'll just have kind of a later follow-up action to make it look a little more Cortex-y. So those are pretty straightforward. It definitely does get a little bit more complicated if you have a back-end component to your plugin. But I think Cortex forcing you to do a front-end plugin gives you a better model in the end. Because what it means is that you kind of force the teams that have these plugins to have an API for what they want to expose. That's what a backend plugin really is just an API that you host in Backstage. But having those teams have their own API that they own independently, hopefully you have a nice way of setting up internal services and APIs like that. I think it's a better long-term model.
Hi, I have a question about when you have an incident, and with all these visibility into the catalog and scorecards, how does the RCA and postmortem look like in a blameless culture with IDPs like this?
Yeah, great question. So we actually have a pretty mature process for post-incident analysis. Every incident gets its own Slack channel, and all the data from how people responded to it will get naturally collected there. After that incident is resolved, we start a Confluence document that is the post-instance response, whatever you want to call it, and there's an incident owner that is in charge of filling that out. Cortex will naturally give you a leg up when filling out documents like that. For example, we attach an entity ID to every incident, or multiple entity IDs if needed. And there's like a timeline feature for every entity that you can see. So that's something that you could very easily, obviously during the event as well, but you mentioned post-incident. So it will help you determine the timeline of events, anything like that. But to be honest, I don't think we have a good structure in place for how you write these documents. It's mostly like there's a template for the document, fill out the document however you want, and get it reviewed. And there is a timeline, like you have to get it done within 3 days or something to make sure it gets, doesn't just languish forever. Hopefully that helps. No question about Armageddon?
You had a question before. We have time for one more.
Hi, thanks for the talk. It was really insightful. What would you say are the top 3 scorecards your teams are interested in?
for us, I do think the reliability scorecard is going to power a lot of what we get out of scorecards in general. But other than that, the things I'm really excited about are absolutely security. That is something that it has a lot of processes around it already. Security has done a great job setting those up, but there are separate processes, right? It's a lot of like security has their own dashboard somewhere. They file tickets against the team. So you just wake up one morning with a ticket from security. It's kind of a, you feel like you're just being told what to do, which is exactly what's happening. But I think it feels a lot better when you can go to your own dashboard and say, hey, there's a security issue that's come up. I'm going to be proactive about it. Or, Scorecard has sent me a Slack notification. It just feels like a little bit more ownership. Other things that I'm really excited about, definitely costs. I think that's a really interesting one just because it's not always easy to measure an absolute number in a scorecard. So being able to like assign, for example, like a utilization rate or something like that to a scorecard, that's something that's really cool to figure out how to define. Yeah, I'm not sure. Cool. Thank you, everybody, and I'll see you around.